Welcome back to the MetaMinds podcast, where we help you master your mindset. My name's Dan, and I'm a fully qualified counselor.
My name's Eamon, and I'm a video strategist.
And on today's episode, we had Fred Schebesta join us. He is the co-founder of Finder. He's heavily involved in the crypto space, the investing space. He's an entrepreneur with a very interesting philosophy on life, and there was just so much in this episode, so much to unpack. Really loved some of the insights into the cryptocurrency space. Some advice on investing as well was really interesting. And Fred hit us with some very interesting stances on philosophy as well, which was really refreshing.
Yeah, guys, if you're listening, do not delete this podcast. Listen to it listen intently because, I'm even going to go back and let's do it a bunch of times because there's so much wisdom here. And we go from creativity to, as you said, philosophy and also finances. And if you're young and you don't know what Finder is, then you definitely need to know. So yeah, thanks for tuning in. Without further ado, we will jump into the episode. Thank you.
So thank you so much for joining us today, Fred. Really excited to learn a lot more about the financing space, and in particular cryptocurrency and blockchain. But before we dive into that, you are the co-founder of Finder, which is a really fascinating concept for a financing app. So I guess firstly, I'd love to know how that all came about, and I'd also love to know if you've had any kind of backlash from financial institutes creating something that does compare obviously lots of different loans and accounts.
Well, I think they, in general, love Finder because we bring them customers that, consume their products and we present all the information and help them make a very informed decision so that when they do arrive at the banks or insurance companies' websites, they're ready to acquire that product and they know all the information about it and they've made a very informed decision to get there. So they tend to, really like what we do.
Nice. So they've actually welcomed it, have they? They've been okay with it.
Yeah. I think for the most part, I think it's still, you'd be surprised, it's still an emerging category. Comparison in and of itself, and how it can fit into a marketing strategy is, it's still a new idea relative in the time space of, marketing and advertising. But it's starting to become more and more, a part of what people's behaviors are.
Yeah. And for people out there who don't know much about Finder, would you maybe have to give a bit of a rundown on what it is and how it all started?
Yeah, I guess, our vision is that we want to better all the world's decisions. And I don't think we started with that vision, but in the beginning, I just wanted to rank number one in Google for the word credit card. And, I used to live off a credit card and I was building my first business. And so I feel I could write about that. And so we started writing about that and giving tips. And I think in what we realized is when we were writing about it, what we were trying to do is help people, make small, good decisions from being well informed. And in some small way, that all adds up and contributes to a better life. Because you can take the opportunities that you want by being financially free. And that's a big journey, right? And there's a lot of different places and markets, and we sort of set out to do that and made a firm stance. I'd say probably from around 2012 onwards. I think before that we weren't as clear as to what we were doing and why we were doing it. We were trying to, compare credit cards and help people, get a good deal. And that's kind of the germ of where we started. And then it germinated, I guess, into a much bigger vision. And, we went over to the US in 2016 and it's a great business, and we're serving Americans in the UK in 2017 and now in Canada in 2019. I think hopefully that kind of core idea and that mission in some small way, I guess, to get people into a better situation I think will make the world a little bit of a better place.
Yeah, because I guess like the financing space can be quite overwhelming, and even for a lot of people who want to choose a loan, for example, or insurance, or go with a particular bank, like it can be quite overwhelming for people. So the fact that you guys have created like this uniform application where you can see everything very transparently, it feels like you are trying to make it more transparent and easy to navigate a space that hasn't maybe been the easiest to navigate. So how did it actually start? Like when Finder was launched, what was it launched as an app or was it a website, and how did it look when it was launched?
You can go back in the Wayback Machine, and it was a pretty rough website. It was just a text page that said that's coming soon. We're going to compare credit cards and help people find a better deal. And there was a little email box, and that's how it started. It was creditcardfinder.com.au back then, and but I think in that idea is there was baked something pretty powerful and pretty strong from the start, and I just think we kind of refined that over periods of time, and asking ourselves, I think, a relatively tough question of why are we doing this, and how does what we do make a difference to people's lives? And that's not the easiest question to answer, and you can answer it generically, but when you boil that down and really get it into a punchy place where it means something and you feel it, that's what we've tried to align to, and everyone I think at Finder knows that mission of why we're trying to do things and where we're trying to go.
I love that it kind of starts from, it really starts from solving a particular problem. Like, if people go into business and they're trying to make money, like, it doesn't seem to work out as much as someone felt a particular pain and realized how hard it was. And that's how things start. And I've kind of felt this myself recently, like, been looking to changing banks and that kind of thing, like slowly starting to get more financially wise and listening to investment podcasts and starting the investment journey and that kind of thing. And in terms of finding original, like, information, it can be really hard and scary, and that's, I imagine, why a lot of people don't actually even take those steps to take control of their money. So yeah, it's really good that it's kind of started from a positive reason to actually help change people's lives, especially with younger people now trying to get more financially wise. It's great to have places to go to actually learn these things and trust as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. We wrote the very first student credit card guide ever in Australia. It didn't exist. We wrote the first no annual fee credit card guide. I'm talking, this is 2008, 2009. We just didn't, they just didn't exist. That sounds bizarre, right? 2009, I think it was.
Wow.
And I think, looking back, it seems obvious, but most things looking back look obvious. But at the time, it's kind of hard to see that trend and, if that will be a thing or not, because people could have just not cared and continue to not care. And most Australians, I'd say, so just to give you some concept of this, I reckon about 75% of Australians don't compare. They just don't bother. They don't even bother looking up financial information. Only about 25% of people do. Most people just don't look at it, and they, have the same bank account and they carry on for the whole of their life. But when you start to lean into finances, it sounds like that's where you're at. You realize, with some relatively simple decisions, you can get yourself into quite a substantially different financial position, and start to, instead of be a price taker, you can be a price maker and start to own the choices that you have in your life, and start to actually create something, right? And build wealth for yourself, as opposed to I guess a lot of people just follow from potentially other people before them, or their friends, And I'm not saying that those are good sources as well, but sometimes they could be challenged. And I think adding financial, information and just absorbing it in some small way that you find interesting can be a great additive to personal growth and personal development.
Absolutely, especially in like the entrepreneurial space, or just kind of even self-development, which is obviously why we kind of have you like here. That it's like money is the thing that kind of is the reason you work. It's the reason you do a lot of things. It's like kind of ties the whole world together. And it's like if you can't invest a little bit of time actually understanding where you're at with it, then you're ultimately, I don't want to say be poor forever, but as you said, like it only takes small actions to kind of put yourself in a completely different position, whether it's putting $100 a week into stocks, or having a higher investment, a higher return like bank account. And it's just, I don't know, it's just so interesting that it seems that so many people don't actually look into it. So again, I suppose it comes back to the point that it's like amazing that you've created this thing that's so simplified and is this hub that people can actually take in all this information and not have to go through what seems like a huge mountain of research just to understand what they're already kind of the space they're in.
Yeah, that's it. And the thing that I found interesting as well when I looked through the Finder app is, the thing that is great about it is it's a hub of information and resources. So even if you don't, use the app to, sign up to a particular loan or for, insurance or whatever it may be that you want to use the app for, like just educating yourself through the app, I actually found really fascinating. Like you've got so many options in there for travel and cryptocurrency as well. So for people out there that are interested in that, and it's really cool that it is just all in this one place. You're not going to a particular website, then you got to go here, then you got to find out from multiple sources. And then obviously it's a lot of time, you're investing a lot of time, and then you don't know whether particular sources are credible, where you guys kind of just keep it all in the one place. So just as a tool on its own, as a standalone tool, I think it's really, really powerful and interesting. And I also find it really interesting that, such a big decision like investment or signing up to a particular bank account is based purely on, maybe a recommendation from a friend or a family member. And it is so heavily influenced by the people around you. And a lot of the time, like you said, people don't really do that research themselves. So have you found that that's changed at all over the years, like since the implementation of Finder and other services? Like, do you find people are more educated now, or they seek more information? Or is it still kind of, what you were saying?
I think that the millennial generation, and I think I hit on the cusp of that. I'm just millennial. Are a lot more into personal development and growth, and part of that is financial. And so I think that they're starting to become the people who actually have the power and control. They don't have the money yet, but they are starting to become the people who are actually running the show. As more and more boomers tend to retire, and that's changing, right? And it's got a bit of a power struggle right now. In terms of certain people's views and still who controls the money and things like that. But over time, that's going to change, right? And so with that, I think what the values and decisions and policies and frameworks and companies and views and societal beliefs will change, because, every generation has certain ideals. Some are great, some aren't. But I think one that is particularly potent in millennials is they're very conscious of money, regardless of what people, I think they stereotype and say, oh, millennials, they spend so wildly and things like that. I don't agree. I actually think they do that because they want to break free and they want to have some control and things like that. And actually, I think they're experiencing extremely tough financial times, and they're hyper conscious of their money. And I think even more conscious because, they've had things like cryptocurrency where they're very comfortable in using cryptocurrency, and now they've had an education in trading and investing and things which most, I'd say a lot of boomers didn't really get exposed to. The stock market was seen as a bizarre place, whereas, if you have an education in cryptocurrency, which is a 24/7 trading market, I think you're going to see a huge series of incredibly sophisticated educated generation of people come through who are very upwardly mobile and looking at their money, and they're very conscious of when they're making bad decisions. That's the thing. They're actually fine, and their eyes wide open. They're like, "That's a really dumb financial decision, but I know why I'm doing that right now, and I'm going to pay for it later. But that's what I want to do because I'm trading off lifestyle today for that later." And I think they're actually conscious of it, which is, I think that's the change. They may be making some bad decisions, but they're conscious they're doing it. Another thing that I think is changing is a lot of I'd say a trend which I've noticed generationally is I'd say this routine of you work during the week and then you go out and you kind of party on Friday and Saturday and then you recover on Sunday, then you go back. I think that was I think that's changing, and a reason why I think it's changing is that less people are bored, and the reason why that I think that less people are bored is because they've got mobile phones, and that's enabled them to connect to more people, see more information, gain more ideas, and be extremely lent forward in information gathering, and they therefore get ideas, and they spend their time mainly on their phones, but also in doing the things that they discover through their phones, and therefore less time to spend, partying and things like that. And instead, they want to go and do things that they see on their phones. They get inspired, and they realize after a while, I'm going to compromise my ability to go and do those things I see on my phone if I spend time doing those other things. And I think that's a big change. It's starting to occur. I think there's a trend. I think I've heard it the other day. It was curiously sober is this new trend where there are all these bars opening up in New York and San Francisco right now that are serve non-alcoholic drinks. So they serve incredible mocktails, and they still do have a great gathering, but just people are being their true authentic selves, and that takes a lot of confidence. That takes a lot of courage to be your authentic and whole self. And the reason why I think that's also starting to be required for people who are upwardly trying to achieve greatness is that there's just this extreme drag right now on the time commitment that you need to put towards gathering and digesting information. And because you spend so much time doing that, you just don't have enough time to spend, recovering from a party or whatever, what have you. And this just conscious awakening I think is going to be the new normal, where it's an obvious decision and an obvious choice. But one that I think will have very profound and I guess societal changes. I always think there'll still be socializing, there'll still be celebration. It's just be done differently. And I think particularly in Australia, I think people are ready for a change.
Yeah, for sure.
They've kind of had enough, and we don't want to be associated with drinking, beer, and it's just we're kind of bored with that. And I think that if Europeans to some extent don't have that sort of attitude. I think America is changing as well, and I think there's this. If the world was going to go through a key enlightenment moment, I think it will be where do you spend your time, and being conscious of where don't you spend your time.
There's so much to unpack there, but I suppose just to hit on that last point, there's a lot of stats coming out with this whole COVID thing. Obviously money ties into that as well. People consciously spending, and obviously people drinking less, seeing what it feels like to live a different lifestyle, getting more time to walk their dog with their family and that kind of thing. There's definitely a huge trend and more stats coming out of people working 4-day weeks and even 3-day weeks and stuff. and obviously still being able to, manage financially and just loving it and thriving, and companies even kind of pushing for that because they get more efficient workers. And as you said, it's kind of like the obvious choice, like moving towards this thing. But it's just like, I guess we've been blessed with this COVID thing, like obviously not in many ways, but also obviously in many ways because it's kind of, lifted the veil and shown people that there is a different lifestyle. And I think if this didn't happen, we could have just stayed in that stuck, and instead the drinking on the weekends, it's more to like, forget about that. I have to go to work every day. But now, as you said, because we're so time poor, it's like, no, don't have time for that shit. No way. I got time to be, I got to be doing the things that I actually really enjoy doing. And, there's more opportunity to do that through phones and stuff. There's literally so much to unpack there, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And on that COVID note as well, like, it's forced a lot of people to have more time with themselves, especially if they're in lockdown or if they're not able to work. So there potentially is this shift, like you said, maybe like a consciousness shift on a global level where people are starting to actually sit with themselves and actually think like, well, what is it that I actually want to do? Whether that's, even if you look at people who are working from home now, like this is almost like a global experiment where, organizations weren't necessarily open to the idea of giving people the autonomy and the freedom to work from home. But as unfortunate as the situation is with the pandemic, it's allowed people and organizations to see that, their employees can efficiently work from home, which in turn gives them, better mental health and freedom to have control over their lives. So yeah, it is really interesting. And there really is like a lot to unpack there. But I think one thing I am really curious about that we haven't really touched on is the crypto space and how you think that will potentially shift the way that we deal with money. Do you think it is going to be a major shift with crypto? Do you think it's a slow burn? How do you think that's going to interact with the world as we know it?
I think cryptocurrency is quite early in its evolution and its development. You're looking at the internet. When we had bulletin boards and dial-up modems, I remember back in the I'd say late 80s. I remember dialing into those kind of things, and they were kind of really text-based and unusual and clunky, and not many GUIs and things like that. And then we needed to find an application. I think the first one was email, and I think there is an application for cryptocurrency right now, which is the storage of value with Bitcoin digitally. So that's like digital gold. I think stable coins are a great way to store money and transfer money, not through banks. And alternative sources of currencies have been coming up all throughout time, right? Go back, you look at the Romans, the Greeks, they all had currencies, right? And every single one, what we got to understand about it is every single currency starts at zero value and ends at zero value. Every currency today will go to zero. That's a fact, because currency is a representation of value. They're not actually value.
Right.
And so, that's why Bitcoin is such an incredible thing, right? Because it's a representation of money. And money is very different to what currency is. Currency is a promise that you'll receive some value. And even what's happened today is all the currencies have been disconnected from that, right? They've been disconnected from what they used to be connected to, which is the price of gold. And so having alternatives to currency, right now central banks just printed, I think in America, $3 trillion. They got their printing press out and printed $3 trillion.
Wow.
And now, that may, for some reason, I don't know why, but it's somehow culturally accepted that, banks print money. And you can look at recordings on Google and go to YouTube and see central bankers saying, yeah, you'll never have to worry about the central bank going under because we'll print some more money. They're open and they're honest about it. The IMF has papers on it, right? And so what cryptocurrency does is it enables, for the first time in humanity, for the currency not to be governed and controlled by either a human or a central bank. And that's the revolution. It doesn't seem like it. It seems, and it's going to take a long time for people to understand that. And the longer and longer, remember, Bitcoin's probably, I think it's 11 years now old. So, it's going to take a long time for that concept to be, acceptable and understood. But I think right now we're literally about to see what it's like to go through a massive phase of inflation. I think in 3 years' time, a coffee will cost you $10. And that's just normal. But why is that normal? Why does your money have to be inflated away? Why does your savings in your bank account, you remember, go back in time, and this will keep getting faster and faster, right? This is becoming more and more of an issue. The central banks can't just keep printing money and saving the day. And this is what we'll find out. We're going to find this out very soon. And so assets and things like Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies and gold are going to be fascinating things that have a new place. And even more than ever before, given this recent, massive amounts of cash printing, we're going to see people go, why does my coffee cost me $10 now? And, how do I preserve my wealth if I've got some, or if I'm trying to get some, what should I actually try and hold? And my contention to you is there's only 21 million Bitcoin, and there'll only ever be 21 million Bitcoin. And half of that, the halvening just happened in May. Half of that is now being printed. So 12 and a half Bitcoin every 10 minutes. And in 4 years' time, there'll be 6.25. So that's called a deflationary supply. And that's never been accepted or understood, I guess, except for in gold's case. And that thesis and that theory is playing out right now. And that's the magic of what Bitcoin is, but it's very hard to see. There's a lot of conspiracy and all this stuff about it. But if you want to break it down, that is the simplest narrative that I understand, and I could be wrong, that is playing out with Bitcoin is what happens when you have a digital gold that's scarce in supply, that's transferable, stores value, and enables you to hold your money as opposed to a bank and not be controlled by a government or a ruler or something else, someone else, some human who naturally over time inflates the currency, right? You go back in time, right? Let me just quick story. In the beginning of the Roman Empire, there were gold coins. They used gold coins to pay for things. That was the currency, which is actually a form of money, but it was used as a currency. At the end of the Roman Empire, a gold coin had 3% gold in it. The rest was just filled with lead and other forms of metals. And so it weighed the same, but its actual value was inflated away. And the Roman Empire stole that money, stole is a strong word, but took that money and formed armies and conquered the Roman Empire. And that's how empires are formed, right? You need a source and supply, and the best way to do it is to print money. Now, that concept is being questioned, and the people want to control their money. The people want to control their value, and that is the place of cryptocurrency and where it will go, and that's why it's so threatened, such a threatening idea and concept to central banks.
Yeah, again, there's so much to unpack on that one. So, but for the average person out there, obviously Bitcoin is the one that everyone knows and understands, but there's obviously so many other different coins. Firstly, do you think what is the timeline of Bitcoin becoming mainstream for everyone's use? And how will the other currencies compare? Will they become mainstream as well, or will it be predominantly Bitcoin, do you think?
So Bitcoin, I don't think will ever be a mainstream currency. It's not a currency. It'd be like carrying your gold bars around. That's something you will store and hold, right? There's this concept of when you go to spend money, you spend, value, you need to pay for something, you will use your cheapest form of money. So, you're not going to go and use part of your house's title to buy, a coffee. You're going to use your easily accessible, non high interest paying cash, and normally that'll be cash in your hand because it's very hard to make money from that and transfer it into other places. So you'll use your cheapest form of money. Now, what you've noticed in cryptocurrency is that people, if you are paying for something with cryptocurrency, or paying, or some people gamble with it, some people pay for services with it, they'll use their cheapest form. So the one with the least amount of value that is ascribed and attached to that. And so you'd be very hard pressed to see people paying for things with Bitcoin. You know, and the simplest way to know that is ask anyone in cryptocurrency to hand over all their Bitcoin, or anyone who's not. And if it's not worth anything, you know, hand it over. They'll hand it over their Bitcoin the last. And that's because, you know, there's only 21 million of them, right? It's got a fixed supply. The other cryptocurrencies have different use cases, and they're yet to be seen and proven, and their models and things like that. And there are probably some successful ones out there. I find it difficult for me personally. You know, I guess I'm a bit of a later stage investor than some people. Some people are very, you know, early stage, and they understand those theses and they have very strong conviction. And I applaud that and I encourage that. Just for me personally, I don't invest in other cryptocurrencies.
Yeah, and it's interesting what you mentioned about, I guess, the value that as humans we've assigned to something like money, which technically is worthless, but we've obviously assigned a value to it on a global scale. And I guess, like, in terms of
let me just give you a quick story on that as well. So in 2016, there was a farmer in the UK, in the north of London, and he'd asked his next door neighbour to fix his fence. And the neighbour was out in the paddock, and he was, you know, hammering away, and he dropped his hammer and he couldn't find his hammer. And his friend, who was the farmer, said, you know, he called him and said, "Hey, you know, at Christmas time you got that metal detector. Do you reckon you could bring it out and help me find my hammer?" He's like, "Yeah, no worries." So he brought it out and he started scanning the field, and it started going off. It started going crazy. They put their hand into the soil and they put their hand up, and they had a couple of Roman gold and silver coins, right? They called up the archaeologists and they dug up this entire area, and they found 1.7 million pounds worth of gold and silver Roman coins. They dated it back to being about, now there are treasure finding rules, and you get paid for your treasure, and so both of them receive the money from the government.
Wow.
Nice. Cool.
Yeah, great score. But they dated this back, right, to being about 400 to 500 years ago, when this was potentially buried. It's, you know, it's not clear exactly when this happened. It could be even before that, maybe. You know, it wasn't clear, but it was definitely 500 years plus. So what you've got to ask yourself right now, and to give context, if you went and got a whole bunch of $100 Australian notes and put them in the ground for 500 years versus a big bunch of gold and put it into the ground for 500 years, what would you have left? And what would be worth something and what would not? So the gold coins and silver coins are worth something, but I could imagine, you know, if you had currency, so things that represented value, they would be worth very little.
You'd dig it out and go, remember this?
Yeah, remember these?
Yeah. Back in the day.
Yeah.
Remember when we used to have notes?
Yeah.
So what?
And you know, if you go to London right now in the UK, I went to pay with a £1 coin, and they rejected the payment. And
Wow.
I said, "What do you mean?" And they said, "We don't accept those anymore. They're old." And
we
that's
5-cent pieces, like.
Yeah, and so what that is the government is cycling through and printing new money so as that people can, you know, that their old value they used to have is no longer worth anything.
Which is like a terrifying concept when you think about it. Really?
Yeah.
So
it's a meta idea that is probably, and that's the place of cryptocurrency for me. But
yeah.
So I feel like I'm.
Oh, that's okay. And I guess that's kind of what I'm curious about. Like on a on a global scale for people to adopt something like a cryptocurrency, what actually needs to happen? Do people need to believe in this? Do they need to understand it? Like, how do you see this unfolding for a larger scale adaptation or adoption? Sorry.
It's
Because
going
it
to
is a
change.
confusing concept, isn't it? Like, for some people, like just for
Yeah.
an everyday person, like it's a fraction of a coin that you're using. You're using 0.000. For some people who are used to like a dollar or a note, it's easy. It's understandable. It's so easy to grasp the concept. And I guess I'm wondering if that is a hurdle for people to adopt something like this.
Let's look at it this way. When electricity came out, people were scared that it would kill you.
Mm.
That's the first thing. They rejected the idea. They said, this will never take off. When the internet started, people thought that was where you got all your information stolen. And you should never buy anything on the internet because you're just going to get scammed.
I still know people that think that.
Yeah, I know people that think that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there are people that don't use internet banking.
Mm-hmm.
They just assume that's a scam as well. And you should never hand your money over to digitally and pay someone on an app. That would be terrifying, So change takes a long time, and probably and usually I'd say at least double the time period that you expect. But what I think you're asking is, what is the catalyst that will change the usage of cryptocurrency? I think that's essentially your question. My contention to you is either one, a central government will purchase Bitcoin as a gold, or two, a mass amount of global inflation in the US dollar will drive people to store their wealth in other currencies and other forms of money, and not necessarily holding currency in and of itself.
Which you kind of alluded to before is about to happen. So like, for the average person listening, what would you, like, if you could kind of shake them and tell them one thing about Bitcoin and crypto, like what might it be, and would it be to invest in it?
I wouldn't suggest, I think cryptocurrency is a very, Bitcoin is something which you sort of got to set and forget. But it's a portion of your portfolio, I think, as it should be potentially, something you're prepared to lose. And for to see it go down by 80% and up by 200% and be perfectly comfortable no matter which way it goes, because over the long term, there'll be less and less of it available to everyone. And that's how you got to see it, right? I think it's something that if you are comfortable with value being existent, not necessarily in a hard form in your hand, then I would look at Bitcoin and try and learn about it. But if you're not, then I don't think it would be for you, because you're never going to hold a Bitcoin and you're never going to be able to touch it and see it like gold or a property or whatever have you. And that's a tough concept to sort of accept and understand. But I think there's other forms and other investments as well you should consider in and it depends on what stage of your life you're in and what your sort of aspirations and goals are. But it's definitely something that's going to become more and more pertinent. And I'd say give crypto another 5 years and come back to it, and you'll see some significant changes and significant usage in ways that you wouldn't have expected.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think like Brisbane and a lot of Australia was like one of the early kind of adopters. Like you could use Bitcoin at the airport and that kind of thing. And there was like, a couple of years back now, and it was kind of like looking at it, everyone's like, oh, what is that? Like, what's going on there? And how can you pay with Bitcoin kind of thing? So that's pretty interesting. Can you like compare which Bitcoin to invest in on Finder?
Yeah, you definitely, you can compare all the different coins and where to buy them, and compare the exchanges to buy them on and all the different services. Yeah, it's something we write about in depth. We have a YouTube channel, and it's something we're very passionate about. Obviously, it's to try and inform, not necessarily advise which one to buy and when to buy. That's that's really your decision.
Yeah. So like, just to kind of take it, a bit further away from crypto and just kind of focus on investment as a whole. I guess like our audience, we're trying to really, I guess, align with millennials or younger people who potentially could be coming into the investing game. So do you have any kind of overarching like key tips or advice or kind of paths that you could guide people down? Obviously, without just saying like do this. Like how do you go about, without obviously just using Finder? How do you go about educating yourself on investments and investing your money in a way that you feel comfortable with doing?
I think the first thing I'd suggest is start early. Start today. Take $100 and put into something. Start small, and then commit to investing every month some of the money that you earn, and do it for 12 months. Don't look at it. Just put it in and go with your investment thesis, and then commit to it. And after 12 months, then have a look back and say, hey, how did I go? And then start to listen and get informed through just places that you feel comfortable with, right? So there are a lot of great books and podcasts out there to listen to. But I think it's that it starts. So let me just take a step back. Financial literacy comes down to two things. The first thing is spend less than you earn. That's step one. And obviously, Finder's a big proponent of that, and we help you save some money and things like that. But that's only the beginning. The next thing is to make money out of money. And what I mean by that is you need to find places that over the long term will consistently turn your money, the value that you put in, and turn it into more money passively. And you need to commit to investing into that and your education and knowledge about how you go about doing that, and committing to increasing that over time. And if you follow those two rules, I will contend that you will end up in a better financial situation over the mid to long term.
Yeah, pretty much every entrepreneur and that kind of thing, like they pretty much all say that in some form or another, that it's like, you got to invest some of your money, make sure you diversify that, and have different forms of income basically. And in its simplest form, like I think I really like the way that you kind of like wrap that up, because it literally is only 2 steps, and it's like obviously there's way more to that kind of thing, but yeah,
that's cool. I like that. So in terms of the trajectory now of Finder as an entity, where do you see this going over the next couple of years? Are there any things that you can share with us? Any future plans with Finder?
I think we're continuing to grow and expand in the US, UK, Australia, Canada, and we're looking for talented people to come and join the rocket ship and drive it forward. So I think where we're sort of changing is we're trying to become a product and technology company. Before, I don't think that's really what we were, but we're doing our absolute best to do that. And I think that that's a big change for us. You might look at Finder as a technology company, but previously it probably wasn't. Yes, it was built on technology. Yes, it does. It's an internet site to a large degree, but now I think it's really evolving and starting to deliver more and more services that people need and want around the world. And I think the future is a lot more automated. I think it's, we ask for the permission of people's data, and we combine that together with our data, and I think we try and serve up as best we can, with our app, some pretty cool insights and financial ideas. And we're trying to work really hard at that. We're not necessarily the best right now, but our team's working really hard every day to get better at that. Whether we're there and where we should be, probably not. Where we want to get to, I think we've got a pretty high bar set, but we would love to, I guess, realize our vision. That's really what we're trying to do every day. We ask ourselves, how can we help someone make a better financial decision every day?
Mm. And that's interesting, because that's kind of where I wanted my next question to go anyway. And it's more so like on a business level. So, you told us that when Finder started, it was more so just comparing credit cards, and now it's become a comprehensive comparison tool, basically. And I guess it's reassuring to hear that you guys have gone through so many transitions. And I know that it can be so like confronting for a lot of people who want to start a project or start a business, or, even for us with the podcast, like it's changed over the year that we've done it so far. So I guess like what I would like to ask is, what kind of insights have you gained through the development process of a business? Like, what kind of insights maybe could you give people who want to jump into a project or a business or start, releasing a product? Do you have any thoughts on that? Like, looking in hindsight now as you've developed through these years?
I think any business, regardless of size, I think is beautiful.
Mm.
I think the first step of running any business is to make $1. If you can, in some small way, make $1, you can make 2, and then you can make 4, and then focus on making 10 and 100 and 1,000 and go from there. And that's whenever I start a new business idea in Finder, and there's lots of new businesses constantly starting, and there's a graveyard of failed ones. If that's the first thing we try and do, we make $1.
Mm.
And I think that for me, the way I sort of think about Finder, it's probably a little different. And we're not probably like every other company in that way, is that we're not trying to become a unicorn. That's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to build a company that survives and endures, that recreates itself. We want to be a phoenix. It constantly reinvents itself and becomes stronger, and reinvents itself and becomes stronger continuously. That's our approach. And that means we probably grow a little slower than other people. That's okay. We understand that. But in some small way, I think when you join and use Finder, it's one thing you can guarantee is that we're constantly trying to serve our customers better and better every day. And we're not trying to, some of the things we do may not seem that, I guess, interesting to some people, but for us, it's interesting. And we know it makes a big impact to people's lives. And so when you start your business, I would feel comfortable and be okay with being small. That's fine. Small businesses are beautiful. Small businesses are fast. Small businesses are where you hang around and you order a pizza and everyone's fed, and everyone knows everyone's name and intimately knows each other, and that's awesome. That's a beautiful company. I love those companies. And turning that into a big company requires different skills and attributes and leadership and management, and you can learn those skills, and you can do that if you want, but you don't have to. That's not what every company needs to do, and that's not what Finder's not just trying to balloon itself into a giant, massive unicorn overnight. We're trying to create a company which survives and endures long after any of us are here and around. Our ideas and our values and our principles, we want them to survive and endure. And I think that's slightly different to maybe some other companies. I love companies like Sony. Sony's a great company. It was so Sony used to make RAM. You put in computers, and it was one of the best in the world at making RAM. And then Sony, there was actually a very famous chairman of Sony who would make disruptive innovations and made a Walkman. And then Sony started making phones and TVs. And then 20 years after, I think, the Xbox launched, they launched a PlayStation. what's a TV company doing launching a PlayStation? It makes absolutely no sense. And
that's cars and stuff.
Yeah.
They just diversify themselves, don't they?
Well, it's not only that, it's that they recognize that today may not be exactly the same as tomorrow. And who we are today is not who we're going to be in the future. And they're very comfortable to look internally at themselves and do the hard changes and make the very disruptive moves and be okay with that culturally. That's a great company to me. That's something that lasts for hundreds of years versus, 25 years.
Yeah, I've run a video production business for 5 years and just recently have gone full time into another business. And that learning experience, as you said, like that smaller business, it is so beautiful. And yeah, having to learn and grow, like not only do you learn a lot about yourself, but also leadership and all that stuff. And I agree with you. It's like, if you're doing it for genuine reasons, like it's not to say that scaling shouldn't be, one of your goals, but as long as you're, I don't even know if that's like the right thing to say, but a lot of people try and scale for the wrong reasons, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And there's a great book called Company of One, which I don't know the name of the author, so sorry to him. And yeah, basically his whole theory is that you can have a beautiful business and it be profitable enough for you to, become very wealthy, and you don't need to have, 1 million different employees and that kind of thing. It just so happens that if your idea is good enough that it does happen to scale, then you do have to go through those kind of growing pains. And, obviously there's positives to come from that as well. But yeah, I suppose there's, we covered a lot in just this like 40 minutes, and I'll probably have to go back and re-listen to it a couple of times. So I suppose for everyone out there, and I'm definitely going to, jump on Finder again after this, definitely go and check that out, because it can definitely change your life. And yeah, I love the wisdom and kind of philosophy that you bring to the table, and you seem to be doing it for really genuine reasons, which there's a lot of people in the business game that definitely aren't.
Yes, very refreshing to hear. So yeah, we really appreciate your time, man. And yeah, if there's any other final thoughts, we'll round it out now. But yeah, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah. The only thing I was going to share, if I was starting again, which I think, if I looked back and I began again, maybe this might be helpful. I don't know. Maybe not. Could be. Yeah. What I think is going to become a premium in the future is creativity. And when I think about creativity, I don't mean just, if you can design cool pictures. I mean, that's one thing, and that's a beautiful thing. I mean, to be able to create in all different forms. To me, great creativity is where you turn the imaginary into money. And that's not easy. But in the future, as things become more and more automated and more systemized, creativity will be at an absolute premium, because there are endless problems that need to be solved, and you may not think they're easy to find, but they're right there. They're right in front of us. There's so many problems we experience every day, and if you don't have enough problems, just go to a different country than just your own, and you'll discover there are a lot of problems in this world. And I encourage everyone listening to do that as well, to gain perspective and spend some time there and live there and become a local. Don't just be a tourist. Be a traveler. And the last thing I think, if I can, I don't know if this helps or not, I hope it does, is stay curious and keep turning over rocks and seeing what crawls out, and keep doing that. And eventually you'll find something. And sometimes trolls come out, and sometimes, bad things happen from doing that. But sometimes really, really amazing things happen. And now is that time to go and explore. Now is the time to be creative and find things that you enjoy. Maybe a quick story. As a kid, I used to just ride bikes and climb trees and skate, ride skateboards and do jumps. You know, I had nothing to do with computers or technology or anything to do with what I'm doing today. Nothing at all. But I had a curious mind. And that's something that no one can take away from you. And that's something you'll always have. And I encourage everyone listening to do that and have a go.
Yeah, love that, man. That's such a powerful way to end. Well, thank you so much, man, for joining us. We'll end it here, and we'll definitely have to stay in touch. Thank you so much.
Really appreciate your time, man.
Well, thanks for the opportunity.